Welcome to the Fhtf Rhtr podcast. Forgetting how to forget, remembering how to remember. I believe that Nigerians are not a serious people. Hear me out. I'm a Nigerian and I put myself in this basket. We are hardworking. We are good natured. We are determined people. But in the most respectful manner that I can say it, we are not serious. Were we a serious people, corrupt officials who have embezzled and stolen money meant for building schools, roads, and hospitals will not be able to show their faces in public and go scot-free. Were we a serious people, foreign propaganda would not be enough to divide us across artificially designed lines. Were we a serious people, the lives of the young women that were so abruptly taken, destroyed, and interrupted in the town of Chibok in 2014 would have stopped this country dead in its tracks, and we would have sought, found, and destroyed any and everybody that had anything to do with that tragedy. Were we a serious people? I welcome you today to this episode of the podcast. And today, we hope to discuss the kidnapping of the Chibok school girls. On the night of the 14th of April in 2014, 276 young ladies, schoolgirls, were kidnapped by the militant group Boko Haram from the government secondary school in the town of Chibok in Borno State, Nigeria. Before this kidnapping happened, the school was not in session. Not because it was not the regular calendar time for them to be in session, but they were not in session because the security situation had become so bad that the students had been sent home. However, the WASC exams were ongoing, and therefore the students had to come back to write their SSE in physics. It was when they came for this exam that this tragedy occurred. Chibok is a town in Borno State. As we know, Borno State is officially the worst hit state by terrorism in Nigeria, including Yobe State and Adamawa State. Borno State suffered several attacks and several incidents of insurgency. The towns in Borno are peaceful, very diverse. People from northern, southern, Christian, Muslim mingle together in peace and in harmony. However, the introduction of insecurity in Nigeria had its base in what we all know today as the Sambisa forest in Borno State. Here are a few numbers for us to ponder about. After the initial kidnapping of 276 young ladies, 57 of them were able to, and brave enough I must add, to jump off the trucks and wrestle their way away from these kidnappers and run away to safety. Thank God for them. Amina Ali, one of the girls that was missing, was found about 2 years later, and she gave very terrifying reports. She said that the remaining girls were still captive. She said that many of them had been forced into prostitution and sex slavery, and a number of them had died. She also said that many of them had been married off to members of the terrorist organization. 7 years after the initial kidnapping, 100 of the girls still remain missing. 10 years after the kidnapping, 82 of the girls still remain missing and in captivity. In 2015, Amnesty International did a report for 2013 to 2015, and they were able to say that 2,000 women and young girls had been abducted by the group Boko Haram in those 2 years. Many of them had been forced into sex slavery. Again, I say, were we serious people? There were 530 students that came to write that exam. They were registered to participate in the exam in the school, but it is unclear how many of them were in attendance, because like we said, some of them stayed away because of the security situation. According to the parents of the young women, they said that 234 girls were missing, but by the police reports and by corroborating the evidence that they had, they said 276 girls were missing. Of the 276, 53 of them were able to escape about a month later. Just shortly after Nigerians celebrated the escape of some of those girls, the Boko Haram leader at the time, Abubakar Shekau, released videos claiming responsibility for the attacks that took those innocent girls' lives. At this point, it is enough to pause and think, because when you talk about something such as this, you realize that you are reducing human life or human lives into faceless numbers. You say this number of people were abducted, this number of people were raped, this number of people were taken into captivity. Those are daughters, those are sisters, those are human beings, and importantly, those are Nigerians. The response to the kidnapping of the Chibok girls is a phenomenon itself. The hashtag Bring Back Our Girls at one point became the most popular tweet in the world. It was retweeted more than 2 million times in less than 3 months, and everybody was on the train, from presidents, world leaders, first ladies, celebrities. Everybody that heard the story lent their voice in support. The First Lady of Nigeria decided to play her part. She held a press conference where she sought to bring the parents to come and identify. Because, and I must state this, one of the more disputed aspects of the story was the number and the veracity of the pupils that had been captured. Unfortunately, the media was in a frenzy at the time, and her efforts turned into viral memes and instances that just turned out to be regrettable. A $300,000 cash reward was eventually offered for somebody who could bring valuable information about the girls and their whereabouts. When 100 days had passed, Christians, Muslims, and people all over the world held vigils and prayers for the girls that were kidnapped. But here is the problem. Before the girls were kidnapped, just a week before that, as we said, the security situation was terrible. But just close by, another secondary school had been attacked, and 40 male students were killed in their dormitory by extremists. And this was not as widely reported. This now gave birth to a new suspicion, which is that the federal government of Nigeria knew a lot more than it was letting on to the public. Now at this point, I should say, before I explore this conspiracy, that is how it should be. It makes no sense for a government to divulge all of its information in a security manner to the press. However, Nigerians were angry, were upset. We could not believe our eyes. And so, when we saw that there were things that had happened before that could have pointed the government to prevent this tragedy, yet those things were ignored, it hit at the very soul of our society. Unfortunately, we did not heed the warnings. Some people would say we could not have heeded the warnings. The girls were kidnapped, they were taken into the den, and at the time they were most useful as bargaining chips to get terrorists released by the Nigerian government. At this point, I must state now that as a human being, the fate of the girls is something that is heartbreaking, any way that you look at it. The ones that were Christians were forced to convert to Islam. Most of them were forced into marriage. Some were taken to neighboring countries like Chad and Cameroon. Several were raped. Others had fallen ill and contracted diseases like HIV. And in the diary of one of the kidnapped students, she described how some of them were able to escape. But even after they had escaped, some of the villagers captured them and returned them to the terrorists. I must pause here because this is a topic that requires some mention, and it is called terrorism sympathy. Whenever there are criminals, there are always people who sympathize with the criminals. When you read stories of serial killers and mass murderers, you will find that when they are taken to court, there will be people there with placards chanting their names. That is the world that we live in. There are sick people, and there are people who are so sick that they appreciate other sick people. Some of these girls escaped, and some of them were returned by people to whom they escaped to. I do not know if I have the words to explain what kind of tragedy that is. Except, of course, I can say that it is a damn shame. Between 2014 and 2024, more than 1,400 school children have been taken from Nigerian schools. Let me repeat myself. Between 2014 and 2024, more than 1,400 school children have been taken from Nigerian schools. In January 2015, in the village of Malari in Borno State, about 40 boys and young men were abducted. In February 2018, in Dapchi, 110 schoolgirls were abducted. In December 2020, more than 500 boys were abducted from the secondary school in Kankara, Katsina State. Boko Haram eventually took responsibility for this attack, and when negotiations were had, 344 of the boys were released to the Nigerian government. In 2021, gunmen kidnapped 40 people in a school in north-central Nigeria. They also kidnapped 317 girls from the Girls Science Secondary School in Jangede, Zamfara State. And then in Afaka, in Kaduna State, in the Federal College of Forestry Mechanization, another 23 females and 16 males were abducted. On the 7th of March of 2021, one staff member and 287 students were kidnapped from a school in Kuriga in Kaduna State. In all these incidents that we've mentioned, the Nigerian government was able to carry out raids and rescue missions to bring back some of these Nigerian children to their parents and to their guardians. But one life is too many. Talk more of 100 lives, or 200 lives, or 276 lives, or 5,000 lives. Ladies and gentlemen, every government has 3 jobs. 3 jobs. Every other thing that we can attribute to the government can be subsumed under these 3 jobs. First job of the government is to defend the borders. The first job of the government is to defend the borders. As a government, Nigeria has defined territory. We know where our lands start and where foreign lands begin. Our government's job is to ensure that whoever it is that is coming into our land is legal, ready to assimilate, and not be a problem to the Nigerians in Nigeria. 2, the second job of the government is to protect people. Inside Nigeria, the government has the duty of making sure that everybody who is inside this country has their rights respected, and anybody who violates these rights should be taken out of society, incarcerated, or eliminated as the case may deserve. 3, and this is just as important, the government has the job to get out of our way so that we can start businesses, get out of our way, so that we can interact with one another, get out of our way, so that we can access the goods in the ground, get out of our way, so that we can reach water and food and natural resources, get out of our way. On all 3, the Nigerian government has failed. The Nigerian government is failing. The Nigerian government is surely not defending the borders, because it has been documented by several national and international bodies that a very large portion of the criminals and terrorists on Nigerian soil are not Nigerians. They were not born here, their parents were not born here, they do not have a passport or a place of origin within the borders of Nigeria. Therefore, our security agencies are guilty of not protecting our borders. The Nigerian government has not protected its people. If they have, this episode will not even exist. And the Nigerian government surely has not gotten out of the way. If anything, the Nigerian government is notorious for getting in the way of law-abiding Nigerians any chance that they get. When you travel across the country, there are 100 checkpoints in 100 kilometers. The police checkpoints want to see your phones. The army checkpoints want to see what's in your bag. The custom checkpoints want to check your NIN, and so on and so forth. When you want to start a business, there are people there to levy unlawful taxes on you. When you want to go about your day, there are men in uniform ready to impose no movement and infringe on your fundamental human rights. The Nigerian government has failed. On the 21st of November 2025, 303 students and 12 teachers were taken from St. Mary's School in Papiri, Niger State. But we are serious people. We pray for every child to be safe, rescued, and returned. We pray for every parent to be strong. And we pray for peace in Nigeria. This has been an episode of the Fhtf Rhtr podcast. Forgetting how to forget, remembering how to remember. See you another time.